everyone for coming to this talk on digital or IT exclusion. My name is Tavier Taylor, and I'm the CTO of CMI. And I am accompanied on stage by a very accomplished panel. I was told to do a highlight of their accomplishments, and I just thought, okay, I'm going to really screw this up because I'm going to leave out the thing they think is more important. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we will kick off. So we'll start with you, Benjamin, please.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Benjamin Oghene. I spent most of my career, 18 years, within the Big Four in EY, Deloitte, and PwC. Nothing against KPMG. But my last role there was head of innovation for the workforce strategy business. And now I run a startup called the Cozm, and we are creating augmented intelligence. That's a fusion of human and digital intelligence.
Kate.
I'm Kate Grussing. I have this funny North American accent, but don't be misled. I've lived and worked here for the last 32 years. I'm proud to be a board member of CMI. And 18 years ago, I set up a headhunting business to do more to promote diversity and to try and lead the headhunting and recruitment sector in thinking more broadly about what diversity looks like. And yes, diversity looks like people in wheelchairs and women and ethnic minorities, but there's also a lot of diversity that you can't see. And so I've had the pleasure of trying to bring that thinking not just to CMI, but to the UK's more ambitious companies.
So I'm Vanessa, Vallely, and my accent's very Cockney, and I'm quite proud of it. Never used to be. So my career started in the city when I was 16. I've worked across 9 different banks and investment management firms, up to kind of COO level at Barclays. And then I noticed every time I looked around my leadership table that there was a lack of women, and I wanted to do something about it. So moaning to my husband, where's the website for me? Where's my motivation? He built me a website. So, he's a technologist, right? Don't buy me flowers. So WeAreTheCity was born then, and today that community, that hub of resources serves around 80,000 women, and we do awards and conferences. But we also have WeAreTech Women, which is my particular passion, that sits on the side with 40,000 women attached to that. And I spend most of my life giving out awards, which is the best possible job in the world.
Okay. So I have a confession to make. I twisted arms to get on this panel because it was something that I was really passionate about, especially being a woman in IT and starting out with no one looked like me. There were no women. And it was something that, throughout my career, I've said, when I make it to the top, I want to make sure that technology is inclusive. And even though I'm the CTO, and that means tech to me, I'm a transformation leader. And the thing about tech is that it's always disruptive. And I remember being young, that in my class in school, people would write my mom and say, Tavier has been disruptive in class. And so I'm like, hey, it was written in the stars that I was going to be in tech. And now here we are in 2023, and we have another disruption coming, and that is AI. But it's one of those things I'm not just excited about. It's like a bit of apprehension, but we have a chance now to make a difference. And unless you've been living under a rock, you've heard of ChatGPT. That is like all the rage. And it's like, okay, is this something good? Is this something bad? And to me, technology is like a child. The information you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. It's like when children are born, it's a clean slate, but the more information they get, the more they have experiences, that is how they become biased, how they become racist. That's how they have all of these different blinders on them. So my thing is, now is the chance for individuals and leaders to take a chance to say, hey, how do we use this technology in a more positive manner? And I'm not going to go into all the technical aspects of how ChatGPT works, but if you're using it, make sure you're putting the things in it that you want to get out of it. So garbage in, garbage out. And so how do we prevent that? So I'm now going to kick it off to the panel because I have some questions and I want them to get into these very deep discussions. And I'm going to start with you, Kate. On your question is, how can data and analytics be used to promote inclusive hiring, and what challenges must be overcome to ensure that these tools do not perpetuate existing biases?
a big question. I will try to answer in a small amount of time. I've been living and breathing this for the last 18 years. And so I am an incredible optimist because I do think that data and technology are our friends. But we also have to think about the guardrails that we put around them. I would compare it a bit to your spam filter. And my guess is all of us are very grateful to have spam filters that block out the nasty stuff that comes into your inbox. But occasionally it blocks out really important stuff into your inbox too, like the great aunt who never emails you. And so I don't want us to be afraid of the technology and something like ChatGPT. But data is essential when it comes to looking at, for example, candidate attraction and candidate retention. But data is always imperfect. So, for example, most organizations are fabulous at tracking what proportion of their applicants at all levels are male or female. Those are pretty straightforward things to track. But ethnicity is much more complicated, not to mention neurodiversity. And so I was in the session a little bit ago across the way about purpose, where we talked about the importance of tracking, and you track what you measure. But we need to get smarter at how we can measure some of these things. So the complexities around data ownership and privacy, I do worry. And a lot of organizations really grapple, for example, with getting employees to disclose their ethnicity. And so depending on what country you work in, companies have a really good understanding of their employee ethnicity in the UK and the US and in South Africa. But in most other countries, companies have really terrible understanding of their employees' ethnicity. And so it's hard for the companies to do a better job of driving that. I do want us to feel good about the role of human intervention too. And so AI obviously can have bias built into it. We heard a vignette this morning, for those of you who are here, from Martha Lane Fox about the Apple app and how it didn't track anything at all relating to menopause or maternity or periods. So that little bit of technology was pretty useless. And so the importance of making sure that there are people of all colors, shapes, sizes involved with developing the technology is essential. Can you put your hand up if you have experimented or used or tried ChatGPT? Okay, so I'd say it's about a third of the room. So I'd like to request, if the other 2/3 of you, sometime in the next week, think of a question you need to answer and try it out. It is incredibly impressive. But as Tavier said, well, garbage in, garbage out. And so everything you put into there will help it get better. And so I think our ability to be more productive and debias our recruiting or our performance management will be improved as we help shape it. I'm the least technological person probably on this panel, but we all have a role to play there. So I might pause there, but I guess the main thing I want to leave you with, again, it comes back to what Martha was saying earlier. We have to keep adapting and we have to keep learning. So while probably very few of us in this room are coders, we all need to get better at using the technology and the data that's out there.
Thank you. So I'm going to divulge a secret. I hope Anne doesn't mind. CMI are about to go on a data transformation at the moment. And part of that transformation is going to entail us looking at data quality, deciding what do we keep, how do we make sure that we're getting the best out of our data. And one of the things we know is that as companies, we tend to keep a lot of historical data. And one of the questions that I'm going to propose to you, Vanessa, is when we're going on these transformation journeys and we're implementing new technologies, how do we ensure that the issues and biases that are in that historical data that we have, that we do not bring them into the new technologies, or how do we address those issues around historical data? Because obviously some of it is really good, we need it, but how do we identify what's needed and to take on to the new technologies?
So for me, I think we need to change the people in the room. That's where it begins. Because that historical data is great. It had a place at its moment, at its time. And if you look around the room when it was created, all those people look the same. We don't live in that world anymore. So it's about how do we get people in the room with different lived experiences, people that have got the gumption to challenge, actually, that's not going to work for me, and have allyship around to go, actually, that's not going to work for this person or that person. So that's what we need to change. But we have a problem there in itself, because we don't have the diversity coming through to be in those rooms, or if we do, we're not nurturing that particular talent. So I look at the number of women in tech, which, depending on which report you want to read, is 17%, 21%, slightly screwed in terms of, you know, how you classify women in tech. You know, do they work in a firm? Are they digital? Or how it is. So those reports are slightly a little bit off kilter, but let's go with a 21% number. It's not enough, you know. And if you look at the diversity makeup of that 21% number, majority of those women in there look like me. So who's in the room? So you look at, for example, Caroline Corrado Perez's book, right, a few years back. So she talked about how many products have been designed based on men, right? So down to, and I always get this word pronounced incorrectly, too many teeth, defibrillator. Is that right? Have I got that one right? It just rolls off my tongue. That was based on a man's vital signs, right? What chance have you got of being revived, right, if that's the technology we're using? Crash test dummies. So it's okay to crash. This is what's going to happen to your body if you're a man. But what happens if you're a woman? We got other things going on kind of at the front, you know? So where does that kind of fit in? So there's all of these different things, but it's not just in those big ticket items. It's small. It's these small little things, you know, facial recognition. We've seen that. That doesn't work. You know, for example, we go into bathrooms where the position of soap dispensers and hand dryers are not accessible for those in wheelchairs. You know, so who was in the room? Who was in the room when those things were being designed? So the problem goes back to, and sorry to peel it right back the onion, to go right back to the beginning, it's about getting more kids into tech, right? And supporting their journeys, because then you'll get more diverse teenagers into tech and people taking tech at A-level, which we know we take women in at A-level and then we lose them. And then they come into organisations and they look up and there's an absence of role models. So they're like, no, I'm going to dip out. You know, or they get to the middle level and we have all the treacle that comes with being at the middle level of an organisation. So this is the problem. We need to change the composition of what's in the room so that we can drive some of this stuff, but we've also got to look at how we get that diversity into the room in the first place.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you for that. And Benjamin, you shared with me earlier an experience that you had, and I changed your question just because I wanted you to share this experience. How can we ensure that the new technologies are used in a way that benefits society as a whole and not just a few individuals or organizations?
Sure. I'm allowed to tell a story.
Yes, absolutely. I want you to tell that story.
I'm not going to jump in.
No, absolutely not.
So I was born in Sweden to Nigerian parents, but I went to university not far away from here, from King's, studied computer science. And very early in my career, I was working for Deloitte near Little New Street. And two police officers stopped me and asked me a few questions around, you know, what I was doing there and where I was a couple of weeks earlier on, and about my ID that says Stockholm on it and why is that and so on. And before I knew it, they were reading me my rights. And they said I fit a written description of a suspect who had committed an armed robbery a couple of weeks earlier on. And I thought this was some sort of a joke, like, you know, these TV shows, you know, like whatever. And eventually I found myself in a police van, in handcuffs, and they're allowed to hold you for 24 hours without charge. And so they held me for 23 hours. So I was in the police station near Liverpool Street, spending the night there and thinking about this whole idea around bias, some of it being unconscious, some of it being conscious, and so on and so forth. Because for me, it was really clear these officers knew I wasn't a suspect. Anyway. Spoiler alert, it wasn't me. Like, I don't write code by day and then rob places by night. That's not what I do. But anyway, when I was back at my desk at Deloitte, I was surrounded by my colleagues who were trying to understand, how did this happen? This happened on my lunch break. And one of them asked me, does this happen all the time? No, of course not. But I do get stopped and searched a lot driving around. And this guy was sort of in his mid-40s. He told me he's never been stopped and searched. So we had this very weird conversation around, well, I know the procedure better than some of the police because I get stopped all the time. Anyway, fast forward to about 3 years ago, there was a very powerful Canadian lady, both of us, Kate and I know, at PwC, who was talking to me about these sort of issues and how that can be addressed within organizations. And we came across this study that PwC did, which showed that actually immersive technology, virtual reality, is 3.75 times more effective in engaging emotional connection to content compared to classroom-based learning or video-based learning. And there were other stats. For example, people are 4 times more confident in applying what they've learned in virtual or augmented reality compared to video. So we created this virtual reality experience where you're in the shoes of someone of a different demographic group, and you see how the world treats you differently. And it got rolled out to everyone in PwC UK, lots of PwC's clients, and so on and so forth. So the first point to answer your question is actually data is really important. Of course, we love data, but sometimes it's about emotional engagement and getting the emotional engagement from leadership teams. And that's what happened across PwC and multiple clients using this type of virtual reality to do that. Our first character was a Black male technologist working in a Big Four firm. And you get to experience microaggressions and things like that. So I do think there is a lot of talk about bias in technology, especially in artificial intelligence, and the use of data, which is critical, but sometimes we miss an opportunity there when it comes to emotional engagement with content.
Great. Great. So now we are going to open up and we have some questions for the audience. I'm assuming we have mics somewhere. So the first question to the audience is, where have you seen technology adoption work well to drive inclusion in your organization? Do we have? Okay, someone just here. The back row.
I had a conversation in the last session with Benjamin about this, but this is kind of taking it to another level where the technology, so basically we were saying about having an environment that makes it possible for you to thrive. So and we're talking about speaking about things that you have. So I've got chronic fatigue syndrome, and the environment that we have in our organisation is where you can work anytime, anywhere. And the only way that you can do that is by having the technology. So because I've got that technology that supports me, people very rarely know that I've got this condition because I'm able just to work and thrive and no one has a clue. But I think without that technology, then I wouldn't be able to work the way that I do. I'd be set to more hours. I'll probably have to travel in, which doesn't help. So that's where it kind of has helped be inclusive for me, because it's created an environment where I'm not seen as being different because I'm able to just do the job to the best that I can because I've been enabled by technology.
Great. Anyone else? In the pink shirt at the very back.
I think from my organisation's perspective, making sure it's not technology driven. So I think there's often a tendency to jump to technology first. I'll use Slack as an example, nothing against Slack, but the leadership team in my firm said, everyone's using Slack now to communicate. Isn't that the best way to actually chat to each other and stay connected, without asking anybody else in the firm whether or not that's actually how they would like to communicate with people? So being people-led and making sure that you ask people who are all very tech savvy and have experienced different communications tools in this instance themselves, what they want to use, and make it people-led, not technology-led.
Yes. And just here in the front, to my right.
Thank you. I just want to share an experience I had at work recently. So we were having a kind of transformational discussion around creating new facilities within our campuses. And the dean kind of opened up the conversation, asking people within the meeting, asking them to kind of offer suggestions as to what should we do. And everyone kept quiet, saying, no idea, nothing to say. And then he said, let the senior leadership team meet and decide what we do, because they're not offering any suggestion. Then somebody within the group mentioned, why don't we allow people to just send in their suggestions using an anonymous email box? So we paid for subscription to have this anonymous email box where you don't even see the email address of the person sending the suggestion. And within 24 hours, we got over 30 or 35, I can remember, suggestions from different people offering ideas as to what we should do. And that goes to show that people have opinions, have things to say. If we can create an environment where people feel included, or using the right technology to facilitate their voices, things get done, and people would actually, use their voices and add to the conversation. So that really worked well, because we use the right tool to encourage them to kind of contribute to the conversation. Because if we had left it at that, thinking that no one really had anything to say, we would have missed a lot. A lot of the suggestions came because it was anonymous. But that also says something about our environment, because why can't they speak in the meeting? Why do they need to do it anonymous?
Agreed. Tanya, the lady in the purple on the second row.
Lady in the event branding. So I think there's a lot more that technology can do to play a role in recruitment. So I've seen it work well so there's technology that will analyze a job description and pull out particular words or phrases that are more sort of male orientated and may turn off certain demographics of people. And I think there's, things within LinkedIn that goes some of the way towards blind recruitment. It doesn't go all the way, but I definitely think there's an opportunity to use technology more in that process to try and rid unconscious bias from all of us in recruitment processes.
Anyone else? Yes. So it's one of the things that if you're anywhere near CMI, you'll hear me say is people, processes, and then systems. So your people should represent all of the demographics, and you should look at your process to understand, are they being represented? And where you have those gaps, you use technology to fill it in. If you start with the technology, you're going to miss something. So when you say, okay, well, the technology, this is a negative aspect or this is the good aspect, technology isn't necessarily negative. You can make it negative if you don't start with the people in the processes first. So that's where, as organizations, we need to look to our people, making sure that we have that right. We have equal representation in our people, and that our processes are also being inclusive, and then using technology to support all of that. That's why I said my role is I'm supporting. I sit beneath all of that, propping it up. My job is not to start up here. I'm at the bottom. And so one more question that I have for the audience is, what are the new opportunities or threats you see from artificial intelligence either in your organization or personal experience? And all the way in the back behind Daisy.
I've heard, excuse me, I've heard a lot of chat about ChatGPT, but I honestly quite scared about people's jobs and the roles and what it might take away from individual companies. And I just wondered what the panel thought about that, because I think it's exciting on one hand, but actually could put a lot of people's jobs at risk.
Does somebody want to take that before I do?
No, you go first, I'll go second. Yeah.
Well, I think there's a human element to everything. You cannot, and it was said in one of the keynotes today, you cannot underestimate the element of the human touch, the human resource. I have one of those bloody robots that clean my floors, but he doesn't clean the corners. So I still have to clean my corners. So, and it's great because I hate hoovering. But it saves me time because I can do it on, so it makes me more efficient. So I've learned to use that technology to do the bit that I don't want to do, but I do have to clean my corners. So that's the way that I see technology. It'll take away some of the administrative stuff, but it's about not being afraid to upskill. And that's where the disruptors come in. We should see those as opportunities to say, okay, well, all the things that are not adding value, let the robots do that. One of the things we're really good at CMI that we've heard from our customers is the customer service in terms of our EPA team. The feedback was positive, and it was because of the fact they can excuse some of the gaps in the technology because the customer service is there. And that is just something that the tech will never be able to do, that never be able to deliver, because that's the people element of that technology. And you just need to look within your organization and figure out what is it that our people absolutely are our number one added value, and the stuff that's all the administrative stuff that people don't like to do, like hoover the floor, then let the technology do that. So that's my take on it. I don't know if anyone else wants to.
No, I mean, I think you bring up a really important point. I'm the mother of 4 young adults. They all have gone through entirely virtual recruitment processes and met no human whatsoever. And so that worries me, because guess what? People skills are important in the real world. And I'm sure the AI is great that assesses them, but the AI is not perfect. And so, you know, I'm all for using the virtual hoovers, but we need to have the personal touch as well, double checking and spot checking. And much as, you know, Tanya mentioned about, you know, taking names off of CVs to debias them. You know, there's a lot more when it comes to debiasing job descriptions than just using the word gravitas or looking for career gaps. So it really comes down to having a balance.
Can I just add that generative AI has been around for years. I mean, way beyond kind of probably about 20 years, right? We've been using it. It's just become a big thing at the moment. And I think ChatGPT has brought it to the forefront because every single one of us can access it. And I mean, I look at, so for example, for someone who's written a book, I don't actually enjoy writing that much. You know, sometimes I look at it and then I question myself and I'm highly critical. ChatGPT is a new world for me. I sound like the best journalist. Sorry to journalists in the room. It still needs a bit of tweaking, but it means I can crack on with the rest of my work, and I've got a tool. So for me, I do think you're right. I think it's something we have to look at and manage. I mean, for example, do I still need journalists on my team? Of course I do. But it means if I need to do something in an instant, I've got a tool that enables me to do it. I just think it's been blown up at the moment.
Says no. You know, it's like if you're going for a job and computer says no, so you're not going to get that job.
But you make a very valid point there. So my daughter's got a disability, right? Same as you, Kate. So my daughter went through various different recruitment centres, given extra time because of her disability and stuff, and the answer has been no. And she's also flagged a number of discrepancies within that system that made it a no. You know, back to those companies. Did they listen? No. Thank you for your feedback, kind of thing. But, you know, so for that, I do think I go to Kate's point. We can't go too far with this stuff because that people side of it is really, really important.
Absolutely. And we just had a question here in the front.
Thank you so much. Hi there. My name is Tanush, and I'm a lecturer, as I just was here before. With your question about ChatGPT, so what I've noticed amongst students and amongst the peers as well, so it actually has brought a revolution in the terms of knowledge and the access to knowledge. That's for sure. Secondly, it has given a person to actually write reports, whether they want an ease of task. Yes, you've got a personal assistant yourself. Yes, absolutely. But what is not there right now, since it has become a big revolution in this time of 21st century, that the students are not yet trained to actually use that tool or software properly. So, for example, if a student for a level 3 course is asked to write about a pestle analysis, he would just write pestle analysis. ChatGPT may come up with an answer which is not even relevant to his level 3. It would give an answer for a level 7, which is an MBA course. Okay, information great. The student has learned. Did he learn from it, or did he just copy pasted it directly? Again, when I was marking assignments, everything like we have got the Turnitin has got an inbuilt feature where it detects AI and software. Students are uploading assignments with 100% AI plagiarism. That's there. And that's seriously there, which means your creativity from a student point of perspective, it's lagging.
Yeah.
It is going to lag. The creativity aspect is going to suffer in a long-term aspect. So we need to make from a governmental side and from the policy side and from the education point of view side, there has to be the policies in place for students and for the lecturers and for the teachers to use the ChatGPT wisely. It is a personal assistant. Yes, you are free to use it, but you're not free to use it where the information is not relevant to what level of professionalism or education you are at. So that is very important. And the second of all, Sorry for elaborating, but I still remember I was watching a video on YouTube, and it's a very nice documentary. We still remember the time where there was no jobs as social media managers and everything. With the invent of ChatGPT, I think prompt engineer jobs are going to rise, which means people who want to become an engineer but not a typical engineer, they can go for it, because you just need to be good with English speaking skills or English writing, communication, and written skills as well, and you can go. Which means we are also looking into aspect of incoming decade. We're also looking into aspects of new job creations as well, which I would say is both. Everything comes with the pro and con. It's just us as a leaders and as a role models, I would say, around the world, that what you lead your younger generation towards is what they're going to follow through this one.
And you brought up a good point there about the governance. And one of the questions I had, in case we had extra time, was about, in terms of governance, this is a new field. It's sort of like, you know, when social media came out, there was no governance of it. And now we're trying to play catch up and go back and do that. Is it the government or is it the organizational level? Where do we in the room feel that the governance lie? Because if we rely on the government, then we end up with another Facebook fiasco and that sort of thing. So it's sort of within your organization, do you feel that governance around these tools, if you implement them, does it lie with you within your organization? Do we want to? Yeah, sure. Sorry, I didn't see the hand.
Cranfield University. And it's a bit like your virtual Hoover that doesn't hoover in the corners. You just have to get to know what ChatGPT does and what it doesn't do. So it's no good asking for an essay about, can you tell me all you know about X? What you need to do is to ask for some of that, but also ask, what's your personal reflections on how useful this is? How would you apply this to your own organization? It can't do that. So it's a bit like your virtual corners.
Okay, I think I just saw a hand. I don't know where it went. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's true. Generative AI has been here for years, but it's like leapfrogging right now. It's growing in a crazy way. And the thing about AI is the more information you feed it, it learns. And so eventually it will be able to give a personal response to an essay. And so going back to the governance, I think we're actually at a big risk. And I understand that we have to fail and then correct, but we need to actually figure out a way to correct before we fail, because, and I think maybe you can share about your experience merging human experience to augmented reality, because I think those are some of the things we need to like kind of bring that human emotion and thinking into AI. But I think even as positive as that sounds, it can be negative, because then the AI keeps learning more and more. And for me, those are my fears, like how intelligent the AI gets. And sorry, I was going to share something else. Like when the data, right? So I just Googled really quickly who owns ChatGPT, because I think whoever owns it is getting a lot of power, and their power is growing daily because information is the greatest currency today. So who's regulating that data? Are we going to get to a tipping point where everyone's like, oh my gosh, I wish I didn't put all my thoughts into ChatGPT, because now boom, 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 all this is being influenced. Just like how we have targeted advertising on social media and blah, 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 and all these crazy things. So I think there's a very gray area in AI. It's beautiful. We can harness it for good things. You're right. You can do great things with AI, but I think there's a really big risk as well. And also, as much as it's, you mentioned about upskilling, it's forcing us to upskill quicker. And that's good for everyone in this room. But what about the people that don't even have a skill yet? They're still fighting to like get themselves into education. What's going to happen to that group? Is it going to grow? Are we just going to kind of put them in a corner and forget there's this part of the world that can't upskill at all? So for me, those are the questions in my mind of, there are beautiful things happening, but how do I feel like we might be back in this room addressing another SDG goal of AI increase the education problem in the world. So yeah, those are my thoughts anyway.
I think you had a question for Benjamin. I'll let him answer it. And then we had the lady next to you to ask, but I'll let Benjamin answer your question first, and then we'll go to the lady next to you.
How many people remember having a BlackBerry? Yes. You might know where I'm going with this. But every now and then we have a big platform shift, and BlackBerry thought the whole touchscreen phone thing was science fiction. right? There's no need to pay attention to that. The decline to evolve with the times. And this happens all the time. If you look at pictures of when cars were first brought to the public, there are lots of pictures of Times Square with horses and carriages, and then a year later on, it's full of cars. And there's a whole bunch of people who thought they wanted to hold on to their jobs that had to do with horses and carriages. This time it's a little bit different, a little bit like the lady mentioned here, because there's this problem we call the alignment problem. So as artificial intelligence, as we're calling it here, we like to call it digital intelligence, as it starts to grow over time, at some space, it will surpass human intelligence in every way. But the problem is getting a lot of human bias in it over time. And there are two main ways of getting that. One is the data that it's trained on, if it's very narrow, and two is the people who are actually building it. So the answer to your question is OpenAI in that particular instance. And if you look at pictures of the people building this, it's clear they're from a very narrow demographic group. So the danger I think that we have, and I think the answer is we all have responsibility here, is if we ignore this, then what will happen is more and more of the data and the people developing these types of agents will be coming from a narrow demographic group, and we might have a much bigger problem in our hands in the next couple of years. So I think we're all responsible for engaging more. Even if you start with just prompt engineering, something as simple as that, I think we're all responsible for doing so.
If I can give us a quick ad for CMI. So CMI is about lifelong learning. And you don't just learn when you're in university as an undergraduate or getting a master's degree. And in part, thanks to this wonderful woman sitting to my left, there'll be a lot more information that's more easily accessible on the CMI website. So please look at it. You'll get emails from CMI occasionally. We have wonderful thought leaders. We have great pieces of research on you name the topics, but certainly on all of these issues, which hopefully will help all of us be better managers and leaders. So please keep going to CMI. And if you look at the website tomorrow, then please promise me you'll look at it again in a few months. And the team at CMI is doing great work, trying to keep it constantly relevant and updated.
Thanks for that, Kate.
Yeah, it was just to go back to the, I come from the awarding body background. So we are actually having issues because we're creating performing arts. It's a very human-based thing. Everybody likes it, but people reflect and evaluate. And we're getting 99% AI, which before we started looking, we wouldn't have noticed. So we've gone back and found that there were some quite early, quite bright people doing it. We didn't even know. And we haven't got anything coming through to help the assessors actually be able to assess without, well, it says it is, but is it? And how do we pick it out? And how do we've got lots of stuff, JCQ have done stuff, other people have done it. We've got all that info, but it's from that education point of view, lower levels, not degree. We're talking lower levels up, how to get in there. What will those kids be doing? Because when I was at school, we didn't have computers. There's one over there. And we looked at it and went, yeah, they'll never work, And then when I was at uni, we used it as a typewriter to type up things and hand them in. And, that's what 25 years ago. And already we're in sort of Isaac Asimov territory in my head. And it was just that aspect of the governance of the lower, well, I'm going to say lower, the sort of the lower levels of education, level 2, level 1, and how that works within the awarding function.
Just next to you, yes.
Kind of picking up on a few points that's been spoken to this afternoon, but we had a conversation earlier. I'm from an awarding body as well, and it's used to think about how to use AI to support people. So one of the things we was thinking about was maybe if there's a question and someone needs to put an assignment to put it into AI to see that they've answered the questions. Other things we were thinking about was maybe it could be writing questions, the questions for the papers. But one of our concerns, and I don't know whether you know how to, to mitigate this, is that because AI is always learning, if someone's got their hard-earned work and they put it in to check that they're answering the question, AI is going to keep that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And then they could share that with someone else. So where it can be used for good, it can also be a barrier. So I'm just wondering.
It's the same as the internet, though, right? It's it's no different. You know, you think how many times we look up things on the internet and, you know, we get the wrong kind of answers or stuff like that. It's got the same dangers attached to it. It's just a more sophisticated internet, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. It's an advanced Google.
It takes away people's the internet. You know, you're not putting your stuff on the internet. You're just looking to see what's there. But if you put what you've put your hard-earned work onto AI, that can be shared.
Oh God, yeah.
Learning, and so you know, using it for the good for that point of view, but trying to find a way to safeguard. So it's like
there's a big, I can't think of what it was at the top of my head. It was something around plagiarism or music rights. It was something that there was a case in the press, but it all goes back to the governance side of it. Whose job is it to govern? And we have the same thing with the incoming metaverse as well. Right? We've got a chance to get that right from the get, not to detract from AI, but to get that right, because all the things that the horrible things that happen in society will happen in that virtual world too.
Absolutely.
So I think we're too far down the track in terms of the pace at which AI is growing. I do think there needs to be some regulation. I do think it needs to come from the government. I think it needs to come from academics. And I think it needs to come from some of the think tanks. We need a framework to wrap around it. Otherwise it will. And there's a lot of scaremongering going on as well. But as I said before, if we can get whatever shape it will be for AI, we need to take those lessons and do it the right thing in terms of the metaverse, because that is coming and it will come. Whether or not you believe it's got legs, it will come at some point in some guise, and we'll have all the same problems with that.
Yeah, the governance is the key. The thing is the timing and when somebody is going to actually take action. So there's a question here, then one behind, and then here. So there's 3 questions on the table now.
Thanks. I think maybe more a comment than a question really, but my name is Richard Jeffries. I'm the D&I lead for the Scotland Regional Board. I'm also a lecturer, so I share the concerns about AI in education and what that means. But at the end of the day, it's here. It's something that we're going to have to adopt and adapt our assessment practices to. So it's not going to go away. But I'm going to reveal my age. I grew up in the 80s and was a complete sci-fi geek. So as far as I can see, we're now getting to a point, our colleague here mentioned Isaac Asimov. Has anyone seen Terminator? Seriously? At what point do we say, right, AI is now smart enough, let's not upload Skynet? I don't want to be getting chased down the street by Arnold Schwarzenegger at some point. So where do we draw the line with AI is adding value? Yes. And it is useful for us to do those admin tasks, but at what point and whose responsibility is it to say, right, hold on a wee second, this is now getting a wee bit Star Trek-y and we're at risk here. At what point and who should be saying no when we eventually get to that point?
Yes, exactly. The lady behind you had a question, and then the gentleman up front has a question. Oh, sorry. Yes, so we have 2 more questions here as well. Thanks.
Yeah. The way I see it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, AI is more or less very generalized, like a child. Is what you teach that child is what it will become, right? I don't think personally AI should be stopped. It's just a matter of us human learning not to fight the resistance and also learning how to work with it. As far as I'm concerned, whether it's organization, whether it's from government, whether it's in schools, you do not have specific training on how to use all the resources we have today. Those resources will multiply faster than we can keep track in training our children and the new generations. So it's not about what we do with AI, it's about how we keep pace and how we keep safe to utilize that resource to the most, personally, but welcome for feedback.
Thanks. Do we want to answer this question, and then the lady to my left as well?
A general question for the panel. I'm Paul Jennings. I work with Aston University Business School. I'm more concerned about exclusion that AI brings rather than inclusion. I'm probably more concerned, not necessarily for the Brenda and Malcolm, the vacuum cleaner kind of jobs. It's more the professional jobs like hospital consultants, lawyers, people whose skills are rare and highly rewarded. And I think as AI progresses, that section of the community, irrespective of diversity and inclusion, will be the ones that face the most serious challenge and threat. I just wonder how you feel that people of that nature will cope with it.
Does anybody want to take that?
I would say if you went back far enough and you tried to explain to someone what a social media influencer is, they will look at you with a blank face.
Go a long way back.
Okay. Okay, I'm not going to ask, but generally, it's very hard to imagine what future jobs will look like, right? Especially when you're having transformative technology like this. So trying to hold on to roles, I think I agree with the lady back there. I'm not sure that's the right answer. I think the right answer is staying as close as possible, because yes, there will be some roles that will stay exactly the same. There'll be some roles that will go away, and there'll be new roles created.
Yeah, I think it'll be a surprise as to which roles are affected the most.
Yes.
Having lived through the 60s and the 70s and the
Yes.
80s and the promise of leisure for all,
Yeah.
because artificial intelligence and automation and robots
Yeah.
would allow us that convenience and pleasure, and it's never happened. I do see a threat from AI, having witnessed it, thinking that it becomes an expert system, and some of the results will be far better than the protein-based experts in the future. Thank you.
I might add, you look at how, for any of you who work at big companies, many of the world's biggest companies employ quite a lot of deaf and blind people in roles that you would be amazed because of the benefits of technology. And whether it's closed captions or, you think of something like Google Maps directions. So, we were afraid of a lot of that technology in the past, but we have so many more people who have physical handicaps who are now able to have much more fully productive lives because they're able to lean on technology in ways that, my guess is most of us, it's hard to imagine.
So I've got a comment more than a question, but I'm just going to respond to Kate's thing at the moment. It also matters who's in the room when that is designed, because in the days when they were transforming telephone systems, there were a lot of blind operators operating telephones in a Southwest police force. And they brought in a new telephone system and none of the blind people could use it. So they all got made redundant. So that business of actually we need to design the technology with people is really important. But I want to come back to your question about, is it our role in organizations to make sure this technology is used properly, or is it the government's role? And I think I agree entirely that we need that framework that you were talking about, where academics and government and think tanks all get together and businesses get together and design the framework. In the meantime, because that's not going to be quick, in the meantime, it's really important that in our organizations, we are careful about what we're taking on. So particularly in the HR space, where we are doing recruiting and we're using AI, we need to look at whether or not that system is biased and what those biases are and how we're going to do. If we want to carry on using that bit of kit, that technology, then we need to think carefully about how are we going to compensate those biases. Yes, humans are biased, and precisely because of that, AI learns what we've stuffed out there, and we've stuffed rubbish out there already, which it's busy taking up. So it's our job now to make sure we do the right thing as leaders.
I wholeheartedly agree. Okay, I need to wrap it up. I have time for one question from the audience to anyone on the panel. If you have questions you want to ask of anyone. Yes, the gentleman over here to my left.
Thank you. Just thinking of demography and sort of digital technology, an increasingly aging workforce, or in many cases not working force, and I'm in my mid-50s, so I'm probably in the target demographic. And I think of how able my 80-year-old parents are to use various systems, how able I am, and how able my 19 and 21-year-old sons are. If people like me or my generation are going to be an important part of the workforce, how do we make sure that the whole of the workforce can access digital data, other technology, so that we can exploit their talents?
So I just want to answer something to that. It's in terms of, again, it's the people in the room when you're developing the technology. I moved to Europe. I'm not going to say when, it's been a minute. And my grandmother is older now. When I first moved here, it was in the days that I had to know when she was coming home from church so I could get on, and call her at a specific time so that she could answer the phone. My grandmother now has an Alexa, which we had to rename Alexa because she couldn't say Alexa. But when she wants to talk to me, Alexa calls me. And, this is some years on, and my grandmother will be 89 this year. And so the thing of it is making sure and that those technologies that you're using, that how does that go across the demographics? If we go back in time, you never would have thought that my grandmother would be able to know how to dial. She still doesn't know how to dial an international number. Alexa does it for her. So those are the things that are very important. Again, it's the people side of it and making sure that you're touching every demographic in that room when you're designing those tools. And again, the data that you're using and making sure that you don't have that narrow landscape. So I just think that is quite wonderful. She got rid of her rotary phone, and it's a new day, and she's learning. She's constantly learning at 89 more than she knew, in her 20s. So that's the way that I view it, is that it's about the opportunity, and again, the framework. And the organizations taking responsibility to ensure that those elements are in place.
Yes, if I might add to that, learning really needs to be lifelong. And I think the model we have today is a little bit broken, that you finish at the age of 21 and then you go off. And so I think a lot of this needs to be a personal responsibility. It's not, the government's not in charge of teaching everyone everything. And so that's why I think an organization like CMI has a really important role to play. Now, not everyone's going to be a manager or a leader, but I certainly want to try and teach my 83-year-old mother more about technology and, explain to her what ChatGPT is. And, by going on the web, it's how a lot of us have learned how to do things, whether it's, YouTube to replace the shelf. But, maybe it's the American in me, but I think more of that self-efficacy. And it's not always about going to school, although I think universities and places of higher learning have a really important role to play. But from a lifelong education perspective, I think we all should be encouraging our loved ones as well as our colleagues to think about, well, if that's the subject you're interested in learning about, go do something about it. And maybe it's taking a course, maybe it's doing something online. So I think we have to keep using our brains and leveraging the technology to be able to access new skills and areas. So, really seeing technology as a friend.
Can I just add one last thing? Every single one of you are technologists. Every single one of you, whether you're a lawyer, whether you work in, the energy sector, we are all technologists. And it is our job to continue to keep our finger on the pulse in terms of what that looks like in the future. What are those jobs coming down the track? We did conferences. We did a big global conference a couple of weeks back, 3,000 women that were on there, people that weren't even in tech, but seeing how tech is coming into their world. So if I could leave everyone with that, don't think you're not in tech, because you all are.
Did you want to say something, Benjamin? Otherwise, we're going to close it out on that note. Sorry, because I've just gotten that I'm over time and I'm being flagged down from the back.
It's
So-
fine.
Okay. Well, thank you all so very much. We can talk about this all day, but we won't. So thank you so much for being here.
Well done.
Great last